Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're listening around the world. A very warm welcome from London in the UK. Well, here is today's news about electric cars and the future of transports. My name is Martin Lee, and this is your EV News Daily for Tuesday, the 13th of March, 2018. Coming up today on the podcast, we'll talk about Elon Musk telling you that if you invest in EVs, you are dumb, and the noise that BMW EVs could be making in the future. But first of all, if I just pick up a copy of this magazine that I have here, it's this week's Auto Express here in the UK, and just something that it just kind of struck me. I saw it on the in the supermarket and thought I'd better pick this one up because it has the Jaguar I-Pace on the front. Full story, all-electric SUV. Headline, life's going to get tough for Tesla. And that's the front page, but then I realised as I turned over onto the back cover, where there's always an advert on the back of a magazine, right? And it's for the Hyundai Ioniq Hybrid. So front and back cover of a major weekly magazine, car magazine, and it's all about electric cars on the front, and certainly the advert on the back that Hyundai had taken out is all about hybrids, and plenty in the magazine as well about electric cars. Who knows, they might even take off one day. Shock. Horror. Well, we'll talk first about Inside EVs being right with one of their reports that was sourced from a very reliable, strong source, they say, but a report that was doubted at the time by many people. The original story was based on the fact that they heard the Tesla Model 3 production line was shutting down for periods of time, and now Tesla have finally confirmed it happened. In February, the Model 3 line took a pause February the 20th to the 24th to tweak the synchronisation of the robots. Tesla said, "Our Model 3 production plan includes periods of planned downtime in both Fremont and Gigafactory 1. These periods are used to improve automation and systematically address bottlenecks in order to increase production rates." Well, the battery pack assembly still seems to be the part that's causing the most headaches for Model 3 production. Panasonic cell production seems to be not the issue. Once that bottleneck is sorted, I would expect to see very rapid increase in production as that bit, the automation side of it, I think that Tesla are going to get right on top of. You can just see that that is something that Elon would naturally want to get right. He's talked about building the machine that builds the machine. I think once they can get that little final bottleneck sorted, the plan of 5,000 Model 3s a week by the end of June will be hit. Well, talking about what Elon says, how about this? He made a surprise appearance at South by Southwest Interactive Sunday panel in Austin with a few choice words of advice for any budding entrepreneurs. Elon said that investing in rockets and electric vehicles was the dumbest thing to do, in his words. Elon also said that he hunts for things that don't seem to be working, but that are important for our life and for the future to be good. If you were to do a risk-adjusted rate of return estimate on various industry opportunities, I would put building rockets and cars pretty much at the bottom of the list, he said. Well, Elon also said that he basically gave SpaceX and Tesla, from the beginning, less than 10% likelihood of succeeding. In the early days, he wouldn't even let his friends invest in SpaceX because he figured they would lose all of their money. SpaceX, he says, is alive by the skin of its teeth, and so is Tesla, coming within hours of going under. If things had gone a little bit the other way, and business had closed a few hours earlier on certain trading days, both companies would be dead. Well, today here in the UK, the diesel lobby managed to grasp on a very small but single stat in the monthly sales figures, where pure BEVs last month in February had a bit of a down month. It was more than made up for in plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, by the way, so the total amount of electric vehicles sold was up, 15% increase at the start of 2018, but the actual pure BEV number was down by a third in the month of February alone, and that could be a lot of supply issues. It could be that the very popular Nissan Leaf here, the old model came to the end of its range, and the new Leaf wasn't in the numbers in February. Lots of things that it could be. However, that was then fed to all of the newspapers and the TV channels that EVs are down by 30%, and this is the beginning of the end for electric cars. Well, the truth is, here in the UK, electrification up 15%. Like I say, plug-in hybrids have become really popular at the beginning of this year, and I'm sure pure BEVs will come back. These things fluctuate through the year. We see that all the time. The monthly figures go up and down. As commentators and newspaper opinion writers latched onto this one easy headline, though, they started to then peddle the myth that EVs aren't working because they're dirty, because they charge from the grid, and the grid surely must all be powered by coal-powered electricity stations. And it did seem like a coordinated attack at some point in the news today on electric cars from those stories being fed to the media. So let's take a look at the claim, because I spent so much time on Twitter today correcting people and just in a polite way, because the internet is a rough and tumble place on a day like today when someone says, you know, you're wrong for liking electric vehicles, they're dirty, you charge from the grid, you could burn coal to drive them. And so without getting into any of the arguments, just trying to leave facts. There's some people that are clearly never going to change their mind, right? And that's fine. There's 5% of those. And then most people, though, are, you know, if you're polite, they do engage with you. And the points I was making today on Twitter was about how people charge their cars. The most common error reported today was comparing the emissions at the tailpipe of diesels, and purely at the tailpipe, and the numbers that are produced on the NEDC, really old, very inaccurate now, soon to be superseded by WLTP later this year, but they're very complementary to petrols and diesels, for instance, on CO2 emissions. But then that was being compared to the lifetime emissions of an EV. They were saying, but you've got to make the battery, and then you've got to ship them around the world, all the carbon involved, but not at any point saying, you've got to bring together thousands of bits and put them together from all different suppliers to make a combustion engine. So it's a flawed argument. As an EV podcast listener, I'm guessing you know all the nuances anyway, but where the battery is probably made in China, right, or Asia, that do have dirtier grids at the moment. So yeah, maybe the battery isn't made in the best place for, you know, it's not made in Norway, where the grid is really green from hydropower. But most places are decarbonising very quickly, so that is a moving target. Many of those who compare the carbon emissions of EVs charged on gas and coal, for instance, take the worldwide average to make their arguments. An EV in the UK, however, doesn't pop over to Australia to charge up on their coal-based grid. Here we have huge offshore wind here in the UK, a bit of solar, not too much, but a lot of offshore wind. I'd love to see more onshore wind, but that's a kind of a political thing because it's not a vote winner. Massively frustrating. And finally, a common trick is to take a very small city car, the smallest, most efficient city car, with a tiny little kind of like a 1.1 litre or 800cc engine or something, like 3-cylinder kind of thing, and compare it to filling up a big EV that everyone knows, like a Tesla, because people just think, well, all EVs are the same, and I've heard of Tesla. So they put that in the news headlines, and that skews the results, comparing a tiny city car to the biggest, most luxurious EV. Well, the truth is, and the general consensus from most of the genuine research done, is that EVs are at least 50 to 60% cleaner than fossil fuel cars when charged from the grid. Well, if you layer in those who charge at home from solar, it's just a no-brainer. But remember what films like An Inconvenient Truth, was it that one that pointed out the aim of those fighting climate change and diesel, all those the supporters of diesel, their aim isn't to win the argument, it's just to create enough uncertainty in the wider public domain to make them really question it. Well, moving on, and PistonHeads.com talked to Iwaki-san, the designer of the super cute Honda Urban EV. It's going to enter production in 2019. Now, you can read the article that I've linked to on the blog and on the podcast description for more. Highlights I thought I'd pick out are when he said, with a battery EV, people typically expect that they're going to see something new, something unconventional. So it was difficult for us to kind of break through the mental barrier. So far as the autonomous driving technologies are concerned, these technologies will not really have much influence over the design. However, the connectivity will have a larger influence because Honda are planning on using AI technology, and that means the system can take over many of the operations. So the interior design will be much more simple, like we've seen in the Model 3, because you don't need all the switches. The importance of design holds for battery EV, says Iwaki-san. Hybrids and combustion engine cars, it's always a priority. The challenge was in the expectations people had of an electric vehicle. They'd say, that's an EV. So it's going to look like this. And he wanted to really put it aside, and that's why they had a more rational approach to the design of the car, which I don't think is conventional. I think the little urban EV, the little round headlight, the super cute design, can't wait to see if they can stick as close to that as possible for the production version. Well, finally, with the newly announced BMW i4 joining the i3 and the i8, the iX3 SUV coming soon, electrification is coming to the BMW fleet, and BMW M, the performance bit of BMW. The CEO, Frank Van Meel, told the BMW blog there have been so many changes regarding engine sound, with the change from naturally aspirated to turbocharged, when you lose the air intake, suddenly you had this backfire and things like that. The sound of cars all changed. Well, now there's EVs, he says. They have a completely different sound than current cars. But like all new technologies, there are refinement levels involved that take time. Take oil burners, for example. Diesel cars first sounded like tractors when they first arrived, and later on they improved, and they sounded pretty nice. Le Mans diesel later came into series production cars, so you can see how there are solutions as things move on from the racing world onto production cars that you have on your driveway. He said, if you look at the Star Wars pod races, that sound was completely artificial, and yet all the kids who watch the movie say that's what a pod should sound like, and that's accepted. So, he says, with the BMW electric cars, there will also be some sort of sound. He doesn't know what it will be, but they'll find a solution. It will be artificial, maybe it'll be enhanced, and it will come to the mind as completely natural one day in the future. Oh, by the way, before we sign off, if you haven't watched it yet, then Jaguar put a brilliant video online, a little documentary, mini doc, about the making of the I-Pace, and about 3/4 of the way through, they interview the guy at Jaguar whose job it was to sit in a room and play sounds as you accelerate the Jaguar I-Pace, and what sound should play through the speakers. So when you're doing 0 to 60, what should your EV sound like? But then when you do 50 to 70, for instance, sort of that motorway move up through the gears as you would expect in an ICE car, what sound should your EV make then? And they are adding artificial sounds to the Jaguar I-Pace to give the impression of gaining speed. If you've driven an EV without any of that, by the way, you will know well and truly that you can gain quite a lot of speed quite quickly and start doing illegal miles an hour. Well, thank you for listening today. Hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to spread the word about electric cars. If you can, please share this with somebody who might be interested. Every previous episode of the podcast is on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, the blog at EV News Daily. Subscribe, it's entirely free, and you get a new episode every single day, and you get it first if you subscribe. If you could rate and review, that'd be awesome. On Twitter at EV News Daily. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you tomorrow.